Don't get them confused. Kauikeaouli means placed in the dark cloud. Kauikeaouli. You don't have to master it, but don't let it confuse you. Kamehameha III was only about 12 years old when he took the throne in 1825. So most of the external crises, like demands from irate ship captains, were handled by the Kohinanui, the regent, or the other powerful chiefs in the king's circle. The Kohinanui at the time was Kauikeauli's stepmother Ka'ahumanu, till about 1832, when his half-sister Kina'u took the role, and then by the time this happened here, it was another half-sister aunt, Kekauluohi. She'd been regent for a couple of years already. But a lot had changed since the time that he had taken the throne. Both he and his kingdom had grown up. Kauikeaouli was about 30 by the time Lord Paulette arrived in 1843, and he'd been ruling a maturing nation for 18 years. Christianity was widely embraced, education was a national project, and foreign relations and trade had steadily expanded. The native population still continued to diminish, and governance, both internal and external, was an ever-growing concern, while Hawaiʻi moved as a people and a nation into the modern world. Gunship intrusion occurred sporadically and had often embroiled the king and his chiefs. In 1839, a French gunship had demanded $20,000 in hastily borrowed gold, because the kingdom didn't have it, to guarantee their right to sell liquor in Hawaiʻi. But Kauikeaouli was already making moves to radically change his nation and his government. That same year, 1839, he proclaimed a Bill of Rights that extended to every citizen. And the next year, 1840, he established the constitutional monarchy to replace his absolute rule. That sharing of power is huge. These choices were partly to ward off gunship diplomacy. For the king and his country could not so easily be bullied if the king shared control with the legislature of nobles and elected representatives. A constitution and laws could prevail. But experience did warn that captains would be more likely to heed the words of their own leaders than those of a Hawaiian king. So 2 years after that constitutional monarchy was in place, Kauikeaouli prepared to send special emissaries to America, England, and France. They wanted recognition of Hawaiʻi as an independent nation, a peer nation, where treaties guided interactions, not guns. A modern government backed by recognition from the great powers of the world would diffuse attempts by armed captains, which had been in place for 40 years, would give empower to the nation. But the diplomatic envoys, Sir George Simpson, Timoteo Ha'alilio, William Richards, were still out there negotiating those superpower acknowledgements when trouble erupted at home. The longtime British consul of Honolulu, the ever-cantankerous Mr. Charlton, was on his way to Britain, and he stopped in Mexico where he met with Lord George Paulette, a British battleship commander. He complained woefully to Paulette about Hawaiʻi's mistreatment of himself and all British subjects. So Paulette then headed to Hawaiʻi to fix the problem. He wanted to demand special attention for British subjects, particularly Mr. Charlton, whose spurious land claims had tied up the Hawaiʻi courts for years. The drama leading to Thomas Square starts unfolding right there. Because February 1st, 1843, Paulette arrives here in Honolulu on his ship, the Carrisford, and he demands to see the king. Kauikeaouli is at the capital, which is Lahaina, and so he has his minister, Jared Judd, handle the affair. Paulette refuses to speak to Judd and accuses him of making up the king's response. He will only speak with the king. Days later, after many letters back and forth, by ship, by the way, Lord Paulette sends a list of demands to the king and announced that he will attack the city the following day at 4 p.m. He formally requested of Captain Long, the USS Boston was in harbor, that he not intervene. Kauikeaouli and Kekauluohi, the regent, responded that they would comply under protest, and they sailed to Honolulu. Kauikeaouli met for several days with Lord Paulette and the interim British consul, and he agreed to review Charlton's claims, but he absolutely refused to overrule the courts and to grant all of Paulette's wishes, because they opposed constitutional law. Lord Paulette was unwilling to negotiate. So February 25th, instead of complying with Lord Paulette's illegal demands, Kauikeaouli decided to peacefully surrender the government to the British Crown until Britain could review the setting. He didn't give him what he wanted, he gave him a bigger piece. His offer may have surprised Lord Paulette, but it was a hard yet brilliant political move, relying on a higher level of justice. Reverend Damon in The Friend pointed out that as Kauikeaouli signed the paper of cession, he was, quote, bathed in tears. This was a very difficult thing to do. He also says it was that day the national flag was taken down everywhere and the British flag was raised, and they prepared to make it a British territory. Kauikeaouli made a speech that day to his people to explain the crisis, and that was published later in Kanonanona, thankfully. And he said to his people, "Auhea o koe na ali'i mena kanaka, mena makaina na mai ku'ukupuna kāne mai, a mena kanaka o ka aina e. E ho'olohe mai o kou, ke hae aku nei au ia o kou, ua pili ki au no ko ho'opili kia ia mai me ke kumu ole. No laila, ua ha'awi aku au I ke ea o ka aina o kākou, I lohe o kou. Aka, e mau ana no ko uali'i ana maluno o kou me ko o kou pono. No ka mea, ke lana nei no ko manao, e hoʻihoʻi ia mai ana no na e ke ea o ka aina, ke ho'opono ia mai ka uhana ana." And because you might not have all gotten that, a translation is, "Listen, O chiefs, people, and subjects from my grandfather's time, as well as those from other lands. Heed my words. I hereby inform you that I am distressed as a result of predicaments into which I have been drawn without cause, and that therefore I have surrendered the air, the sovereignty of our land. Be it known. But my rule over you and your rights shall continue, for I am hopeful that the air, the sovereignty of the nation, will be restored once my actions have been justified." Those are his words to his people. The nation held its breath, awaiting the outcomes. During the 5 months of Paulette's occupation of Hawaiʻi, he appointed himself and his officers as the head of the government, destroyed all Hawaiian flags, and raised the Union Jack in their places, preparing Hawaiʻi to be a British territory. He cleared the houses off the waterfront land at the wharf that Charlton claimed and took over control of all land transactions. A few months go by. July 26th, Lord Admiral Richard Thomas, Lord Paulette's commander and the highest ranking officer in the British Pacific Squadron, arrived from Valparaiso, Chile. He was on his ship, the HMS Dublin, and he requested a meeting with Kauikeaouli. He reviewed the situation and decided that Paulette's actions were inappropriate and that the occupation must end. He arranged for a public event to document the restoration of the nation's independence and self-rule. Jared P. Judd gave a speech about 20 years later and gave a blow-by-blow report of what happened on the day. So this is our portal in time. But I want to point out that you cannot see the fort from here. And there was no flagpole. There was nothing to put the flag on. There wasn't a British flag here. There was a dusty plain in the middle of the 2 points. So, but Puakea had a fort right behind us. So watch that as it works out. He described this in his 1865 speech. Kauikeaouli emerged from the grounds of Kane'ina, where the palace is, on horseback, along with Ke Koanoa, Paki, Keoniana, Kanoa, Kivini, and some foreigners, and they rode for Kulookahua. Admiral Thomas was already here with his troops and mounted guns and all his grandeur, And also there were the young chiefs and a throng of natives and foreigners awaiting the appearance of the king. When the king arrived, Admiral Thomas approached him holding the Hawaiian flag in his hands. The king and all his people dismounted, and the admiral came to him, opened the flag to the wind, and then gave it to Kauikeaouli's flag bearer. Right then, 21 mounted guns fired a salute to the flag. The British flag atop Puakea, Punchbowl Crater, was lowered while the Hawaiian flag was drawn up again, whereupon 21 guns of Puakea sounded. Then the British flag was pulled down at the fort, and the Hawaiian flag was raised there, and the fort fired a 21-gun salute, followed by 21 guns from the ship Carrisford, 21 from the Dublin, 21 from the ship Hazard, and 21 from the American ship Constellation. When that was over, the 21 mounted guns here in the park fired one more salute in honor of the king. The British soldiers stood in a circle, saluting the king, and when that ceremony was done, the king returned to the palace. At 1 o'clock, the king, his soldiers, and a crowd of people all went to the church of Kauikeaouli and gave thanks to God for his grace in restoring the sovereignty of the nation. At 3 o'clock that day, the king went aboard the ship Dublin to a dinner hosted by the admiral. And when the Carrisford saw the king's flag on the skiffs, a 21-gun salute was fired, followed by 21 guns from the Hazard, then the Dublin, then a 21-gun salute from the Constellation. When the dinner on board ship had finished, the king and his retinue came back ashore, and the Dublin fired another 21-gun salute, followed by the Carrisford, then the Hazard, then the Constellation. A lot of gunfire. The next day at the great feast at Luakaha, thousands, 20,000 people served. Kauikeaouli proclaimed July 31st as a holiday for the nation and the people. Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. The air. Not ea, by the way, the air. The sovereignty or life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. This maxim, proclaimed in the king's speech at Kauikeaouli, became an adage for the Hawaiian kingdom and has been adopted as the official motto of the state of Hawaii. 315 gunshots, many speeches, feasts for thousands, and songs. They all celebrated the event which began right here. It was a grand jubilation, and it was celebrated throughout the islands every year until the overthrow in 1893. In more recent years, the restoration of Restoration Day has again become a yearly commemoration. History lives. There are several outcomes, though, of the events that happened right here 175 years ago. The initial outcome, well, Belgium, Britain, France, and the US did grant official recognition of Hawaii as an independent peer nation, the first non-European country to be so recognized ever. That endeavor was already in place. Kauikeaouli had sent the emissaries in 1842, but it was still in motion, and the news of the events going on in Hawaii gave impetus to that final success. So I think it's worth looking at as an outcome. An important outcome of La Hoʻihoʻi was Kauikeaouli and his government initiating the Mahele, which documented title to all lands in the kingdom so future frivolous claims could never occur. That would never happen again. A second outcome of the 1843 events was in January of 1850, the Privy Council approved the establishment of the first park in the Hawaiian Islands. A brand new concept. They named it for Admiral Thomas. Why 7 years later? Well, it turns out that the year before, 1849, there was another international event. A French warship bombs and destroys the fort, and things happen. On the heels of that, the Privy Council doesn't honor that injustice, but chooses to honor a past act of justice. That was really important. So it was laid out in the design of the Union Jack. Thomas Square has been a public park since 1850. It continues to be a memorial to fairness, overcoming force and power. It is often cited that when Queen Liliuokalani relinquished her government to the United States, whose forces backed the 1893 overthrow, her diplomatic model was Kauikeaouli's unshaking belief that a larger justice would win over direct military might. The outcomes of the two events were not the same, at least so far, but it is critical that we as a people continue to commemorate the historical models that honor the highest of principles. Thomas Square stands as an elegant example of that kind of model. It gives physical presence to the words of Kauikeaouli on that happy day in 1843, Ua mau ke eo ka aina I ka pono. And it reminds us that justice can indeed be more powerful than force and might. The statue of Kauikeaouli, Kamehameha III, is unveiled today to honor the boy, the man, the ali'i, the mo'i, who ruled his kingdom through 29 turbulent years. It stands here because the events of La Hoʻihoʻi embody Kauikeaouli's vision of Hawaii in the global world of his time, and give form to how he integrated and adapted the larger systems and values into his venerable society as a developing nation. He fostered literacy, education, equal rights, a constitutional monarchy, national independence, private land ownership, a fire department, and a band. Come on. And he became known by his people as Kamo'i Lokomaikai, the benevolent king. Today we commemorate history and what happened right here, and which shaped Hawaii's past and present, and what we know in the present shapes the future. As part of this celebration, the Hawaiian flag once again flies just as higher than it did 175 years ago. The statue of Kauikeaouli Kamehameha III will remain here as a perpetual tribute to one of Hawaii's great heroes, Kamo'i Lokomaikai, the benevolent king. Mahalo anui.